A warm welcome to the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here the stories were taken up within the half hour. Funerals hold for 5 Al Jazeera journalists killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump orders the homeless in Washington, D.C. to leave the city, a solution to solving crime. Thus, Ghana mourns victims of the tragic helicopter crash in which 2 of its ministers were killed. Funerals are holding in Gaza for 5 Al Jazeera journalists killed in Israeli airstrikes in the city. One of them is 28-year-old correspondent Anas al-Sharif, whom the IDF alleged had served as the head of a terrorist cell in Hamas. Another Al Jazeera correspondent and 3 camera operators were killed in the attack. A 6th victim has been identified as a freelance reporter. Al Jazeera says the attack was a targeted assassination, and yet another blatant and premeditated attack on press freedom. The attack has stirred global response. The Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani condemning what he describes as the deliberate targeting of journalists by Israel in the Gaza Strip. Posting on social media platform X, he said, "These crimes are beyond imagination and reveal the inability of the international community and its laws to stop this tragedy." The UK government says it's gravely concerned by the killing of the journalists. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Israel should ensure journalists can work safely and report without fear. He's also called for an independent investigation into the killing of Anas al-Sharif and his colleagues. It comes as Israel prepares to take control of Gaza City, something the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says is necessary to decimating Hamas. The IDF says it would prepare to take control of Gaza City while providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population outside the combat zones. Hamas has warned of fierce resistance to the move. Meanwhile, Israel defended itself before the emergency UN Security Council on Sunday. Its representative, Brett Miller, said the IDF has no desire to remain to permanently occupy Gaza. Miller insisted the plan approved by the Israeli Security Cabinet is the only way to ensure a better future. Backing Israel's plan is the U.S. representative, Dorothy Shear, who cited Israel's right to self-defense. Several states, including Russia, France, the UK, Slovenia, and the European Commission, all condemn Israel's plans to expand its military operations, warning that such action would violate international law.
On the situation in Gaza.
The United States government believes that today's meeting is emblematic of the counterproductive role that far too many governments on this council and throughout the UN system have played on this issue. It is not negotiating in good faith. We know this because we are in the room. The simple truth is that this war could end today if Hamas let the hostages and all of Gaza go free. Remarkably, instead of pressuring Hamas, members of this body have encouraged and rewarded its intransigence, actively prolonging the war by spreading about Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the United States, and by handing propaganda victories to terrorists. Mr. President, the most recent round of negotiations collapsed because Hamas drew encouragement from efforts to target Israel with libels and lies. The government of Israel did not make its decision to advance its military campaign in a vacuum, but after months of Hamas's intransigence. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages. The United States supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas's terrorism. And ultimately, Israel has a right to decide what is necessary for its security and what measures are appropriate to end the threat posed by Hamas and other similar groups.
The IDF is preparing to take control of Gaza City while ensuring humanitarian assistance flows to civilians outside combat zones and away from the reach of Hamas. This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime. As our briefer stated earlier, I wish to reiterate the principles, the 5 clear principles that the Israeli Security Cabinet adopted for concluding the war. 1, the disarming of Hamas. 2, the return of all our hostages, both living and deceased. 3, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. 4, Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip. 5, the establishment of a non-Israeli peaceful civil administration governed neither by Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority.
Now, staying with activities on Sunday, violent clashes broke out in the streets of London as tensions escalated between pro-Israeli demonstrators and pro-Palestinian supporters. The march comes after the Israeli plan to expand military operations and take control of Gaza City. Backing up to Saturday, a rally in support of Palestine Action, now a government-prescribed terrorist organization, saw the arrest of over 500 individuals, scores of them over the age of 70. That now banned group took part in direct action protests, including at a British airbase earlier this year.
Everybody's thoughts and feelings to hold back people against their will, and they're starving them, there's no question about that. Forget the world press, they are all being starved one after the other. The civilian population, a lot of them are masquerading as civilians, and they're not. And there's evidence of that, which Israel's got.
We have hostages still in bunkers, starving to death, including one they're given whatever you call it, to dig their own grave. No one on the mainstream media has even put it out there. No one in the government is talking about it. I'm ashamed to be British. This government it's not a government, and this might not make any difference, but for me, I feel I need to do something to show my support. Right now, Israel has to do whatever it takes to get those hostages out, dead or alive, and please God, they're alive and they can be saved.
I want to bring in now author and security analyst Saul Sadker. He's in Tel Aviv from where he joins us. Saul, thanks for joining us on the program today. Let's begin with the Israeli plan to expand military operation in Gaza. How does this differ from the initial accusation that Israel, at the start of this Israel-Hamas war, that Israel was wanting to occupy Gaza?
Israel has never wanted to occupy Gaza. 20 years ago this month, Israel pulled all its civilians, 10,000 of them, and all its troops out of Gaza and intended to allow a proto-Palestinian state to develop there. Instead, it was turned into the greatest terror hub in the world, with every single aspect of civil society, from schools to hospitals to journalism, as we saw yesterday, turned into weapons of war. Israel has absolutely no interest in occupying Gaza. It has no interest in managing the lives of 2 million Arabs. Quite the contrary.
So what exactly would expanding military operations in Gaza look like? Because that's where the Prime Minister is headed, and I know the IDF is preparing to begin the operation as soon as possible.
For the past 6 months approximately, since the end of the previous truce, the IDF has been working its way across the Gaza Strip and raised its occupation. It was previously, during the ceasefire, it was occupying about 10% of Gaza around the margins and on the border with Egypt. And it has been inching its way across and currently occupies approximately 75% of the Gaza Strip, perhaps slightly less. And what remains out of the IDF control is the core of Gaza City and some towns in the central part of the Strip. it is believed that the remaining 20 living hostages, as well as the 30 corpses of hostages that had been kidnapped as either as bodies or hostages that were killed in captivity, remain in those remaining areas, which is the core of Gaza City and those towns in the central part of the Strip. So obviously, since Israel's attempts at negotiation with the hostage takers of Hamas have failed, and nothing that Israel was able to offer them, including essentially immunity for their leaders and flights to foreign countries, was able to tempt them into making any kind of deal, Israel has no choice but to continue its pressure, to continue essentially inching forward. And at the current rate of occupying and controlling approximately 10% a month, we can assume that this mission will take another few months.
Right. And now the attacks on
Israel, of course, is meticulous to...
Okay.
Israel, of course, is meticulous to warn civilians in advance when they're approaching, and they go area to area, clearing out areas of civilians, warning them in advance, and following that, they move in with the troops and clear the areas of booby traps. Approximately half of all the buildings that they come across are being booby trapped. It's turned into the most complex urban battlefield that the world has ever seen by far.
But the attack
so it's a slow process.
Right, but the attacks on the Al Jazeera journalists were intentional. It's one of the few times the IDF has admitted to attacking targets. These are civilians, aren't they? They're just journalists doing their job, in Gaza. How do you think, Prime Minister Netanyahu will hide this, hold his own end of the bargain? His promise to allow international journalists into Gaza, can he be trusted? I mean, if Al Jazeera journalists can be killed in the line of duty while in Gaza.
The game for the Hamas from the beginning, and what they spent 20 years setting up, it was to create a battlefield whereby the civilian aspects of life were turned into weapons. And that way they win twice. They win because they are making their own people suffer and thereby controlling them. And also, when they forced Israel to, for example, attack schools or hospitals, or in this case, we're calling them journalists, but of course, the man attacked yesterday was not a journalist. He was a terrorist, and he was confirmed as such by the IDF, who had provided ample evidence that he was a terrorist, and was entirely correctly eliminated. When these people are attacked, they're attacked for a reason. They're not attacked for any particular reason, for no reason at all. And of course, it is not in the interest of Netanyahu or the IDF. No Israeli interest exists in causing harm to innocent civilians. On the contrary, they want to stop innocent civilians getting harmed because Hamas uses that as PR against them and all Hamas's allies in the media led by Qatar. It's not that we need to trust Netanyahu. Netanyahu has absolutely no motive at all to arrange for anyone to be harmed who is not competent. But yesterday, the people that were eliminated, the Al Jazeera journalists in particular, is absolutely incompetent. And the journalists who are presenting him as one of their own, as a journalist, are being disingenuous because they're well aware that he isn't, because there's plenty of evidence. And what they're doing is, by allowing Hamas to perpetuate the lie that this man, Nasser Sharif, was a journalist and not a terrorist, they are putting all journalists at risk in future because all the terrorist organizations in the world are going to notice. And they're going to realize that all they need to do to win PR victories, which is, after all, what terrorism is about. Terrorism, you can't defeat a state by terrorism, but the terrorism can damage the state that they're attacking in terms of its internal self-belief and in terms of its international PR. That's the purpose of terrorism. So if you tell these terrorists that if you want PR victories, what you have to do is you have to tell people that you're terrorists and journalists, and then that when the journalists who are actually terrorists die, all the journalists in the world will then support them as journalists. You are encouraging the further weaponization of the very idea of journalism. And that is a very big mistake.
Also, thank you again for joining us on the program and sharing your thoughts and
My
your
pleasure.
analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Welcome back. We're in the United States now, where President Donald Trump wants homeless people out of the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. President Trump was given the directive hours ago as he reeled out his plan to make the city safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. Trump signed an order last month making it easier to arrest homeless people, and he last week ordered federal law enforcement into the streets of Washington, D.C. Writing on his Truth Social handle, the U.S. president said the homeless have to move out immediately, adding, "We will give you places to stay, but far from the capital. The criminals, you don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong." Now, the specifics of the president's plan are not very clear, but in a 2022 speech, he proposed moving homeless people to high-quality tents on inexpensive land outside cities, while providing access to bathrooms and medical professionals. Staying in the United States, Tesla billionaire Elon Musk's electric car and energy company Tesla has applied for a license to supply electricity to British homes. And if approved, the energy watchdog Ofgem, it would allow Tesla to take on the big firms that dominate the UK energy market to provide the electricity to households and businesses in England, Scotland, Wales as soon as next year. Tesla, which is best known as one of the world's biggest makers of electric vehicles, also has a solar energy and battery storage business. Ofgem can take up to 9 months to process applications for energy supply licenses. Tesla Electric already operates a power supplier in Texas that allows owners of its EVs to charge their cars cheaply and pay them for feeding surplus electricity back to the grid. A new report released by South Korea's defense ministry says the country's military has shrunk to about 450,000 people, a decline of 20% over the last 6 years. A main reason behind the decline has been pinned on the declining birth rate, which at 0.75 babies per woman is the world's lowest. South Korea retains compulsory military service mainly because the country is still technically at war with its nuclear-armed neighbor, North Korea. A study published by South Korean researchers in July had suggested that the country would need at least 500,000 soldiers to defend against an attack from the north, which is believed to have 1.3 million active duty members. The study says the difference in military sizes put South Korea in a structurally difficult position to succeed in defense. A ship from the China Coast Guard has collided with a Type 052D destroyer of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. They were reportedly attempting to catch a patrol boat from the Philippine Coast Guard in the South China Sea. The incident reportedly caused substantial damage to the CCG vessel, rendering it unseaworthy, as shown in footage just on your screen. The footage also shows the PCG operator offering assistance via radio, including medical and man-overboard recovery. China's Coast Guard stated that the collision occurred while taking necessary measures to expel Philippine vessels from the waters of Scarborough in the South China Sea. According to media reports, the interception of Philippine vessels was attempted after warnings were ignored. China described the operation as professional, standardized, legitimate, and legal.
Medical personnel on board, should you need any assistance, we are willing to provide.
And staying with defense, India's Chief of Army Staff, General Upendra Dwivedi, has suggested India's next war may happen soon, warning that preparations must be made ahead of what he described as non-kinetic battles. The general also called for greater civilian participation in army operations, noting that citizen soldiers are omnipresent and that any information from them, including drone sightings, should be shared through an app to identify whether a drone is friendly or hostile. This approach, he says, was tested during the Amnath Yatra in Jammu and Kashmir and could be expanded if successful. Additionally, the general recounted India's Operation Sidnor, describing it as a game of chess.
We did not know what is the next move the enemy is going to take and what are we going to do. This is something we called about the gray zone. Gray zone is that we are not going for the conventional operations, but we are doing something which is just short of the conventional operations. Conventional operations means go with everything, Clausewitzian approach. Take whatever you have. And if you're able to come back, it's okay, otherwise stay there. But that is the thing which we talk about, the conventional approach. Here the gray zone is any activity which is taking place in all domains. That is something which we are talking about, and Ops Hindu taught us that this is the gray zone. So we were making the chess moves, he was also making the chess moves. Somewhere we were giving him checkmate, and somewhere we were kind of going in for the kill, at the risk of even losing our own, but that's the way life is all about. So how the future war we look at, I'll talk about it in 4 trends. Then first one which comes is diffused. Diffused means the battlefronts are actually not defined. There's no clear battlefronts. And do we look at, as of today, that has the Indo-Pak war finished? Has the Iraq-Iran war finished? Has the US-Iraq war finished? Has the Afghanistan-US or Russia or Pakistan conflict got over? The answer is not known to you and me. So what I am saying, these are something which are perseverant wars, and we have to live with this kind of a situation. So what I am saying, citizen soldiers are omnipresent, and any kind of information which they have, if they give us, for example, drones, as you see where the drones are flying, so that if it is put in the app, it helps us knowing that whether it's our drone, whose drone. And this kind of a thing we have tried in the Amarnath Yatra recently in J&K. And if it becomes successful, we'll develop it more. And with the kind of intelligence here which is sitting here, definitely we'll be able to make it more, if I can say that, fail-safe proof.
So they're filling up water guns for the ultimate fight on the streets of Madrid. It's the water gun battlefield now because of the sultry summer weather. There has been rising temperatures across the country. That's what's happening in the Spanish capital. Dozens of locals and tourists taking to the streets armed with their water guns and turning the Arturo Berea Square into Lafpais, in the Lafpais district, into a playful playground and battleground against the city's scorching summer heat. Temperatures have been rising all through from the month of August up until, from the month of July up until the month of August, with people coming down with heat strokes and others unable to cope with the rising temperatures. At least 1,180 people have died from heat-related causes between May and July, a steep rise from 114 in the same period of last year. The extreme weather is also fueling wildfires, particularly in the country's northern regions. Really didn't get to see the fight. I apologize. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Uvani.